I don't know what comes to mind for you when you think of journeys and your favourite journeys, your favourite trips. I remember when I was a boy and we lived in Inverell, one of my favourite journeys was going on holidays to Toongabbie. Who wouldn't want to go on holidays to Toongabbie to see my grandmother? And these were different times, right? Some of you remember this. I had to explain it to some of the young people in the 9:30 meeting. But we had an E.H. Holden and Dad had roof racks on the top and we put all the luggage on the top and we folded the back seat down and we put a mattress in the back of the station wagon and we lay down, travelled through the night, and we lay down and slept through the night as we drove. Did anybody ever do that? Sleep in the back of a station wagon? It's illegal now. You lawbreakers, you. I can remember another thing when I was a boy, particularly living in the country, I remember coming down to Sydney going to Collaroy. And when you come down off the plateau, you know, and you kind of come over the hill and you see the ocean in front of you. And I remember thinking, wow, this is a destination. This feels like a holiday. I wonder what it is about journeys that makes them special or unique, what makes them meaningful. Is it the company you keep that makes the journey memorable or exciting? A couple of years ago, I drove the youth group when they were doing one of their service weeks and they'd been into Redfern to help out, and I was driving them home from Redfern. And the whole way back from Redfern to Parramatta, they sang really loudly the whole way, without ceasing. And what makes a journey enjoyable? Is it the mode of transport that makes the journey enjoyable? I've been on one plane trip that I've never been able to share with Sharon because she refuses to let me tell this story, that I once got upgraded to first grade. I was telling her on my own, she wasn't with me, so I'm not allowed to talk about it in front of her. But it was great. It was great. What makes a journey worthwhile? Is it the person at the end of the journey? Is it the person that you're going to see? Is that what makes the journey a journey worth travelling, a journey worth doing? And that was certainly the case for the Magi. I mean, that's a funny word, isn't it? It just makes you think of noodles, let's be honest. All right? You think of instant noodles when you think of that word. That's not what it meant. It was actually a word that kind of meant wise men, but really kind of astrologer or astronomer, which are essentially the same thing in the ancient world. People who studied the stars for portents in the stars. And of course the stars figured more in their lives, probably really because they could see them. Remember, we're talking about a world 2,000 years ago that was lit by oil lamps, right? And tallow candles. So the stars were visible. It's like when you go to the bush on a camping holiday and you say, where are all those stars? I don't remember, I don't notice them. So the stars were a much more visible presence in their life and they studied them. And of course they were part of the pagan world. Now, so pagan doesn't mean atheist, by the way. Pagan is to have a view of the world, we would say a non-Christian view, that all of the world is connected, all right? And so little things we do actually can impact something else. So if you've ever had a superstition, you know, like knock on wood or something like that, or if you're ever playing sport or you did something and you played really well and you thought, oh, I had those socks on and I played really well. It was the first time I worn them, I scored a century, and then you think they must be my lucky socks. All right, so the next week you wear them and you bat really well again in your lucky socks, and the next week you wear them and you don't bat quite so well, but you don't blame the socks. There was something else that's gone wrong. And that's a superstition. Somehow we believe that something we can do over here is connected to something else over here, and that's what paganism is. All right, this view that the world is a closed system and everything is connected, and something we can do here affects something over here. And often it was done by trial and error. So you'd put a horseshoe above your door and you'd say, well, we didn't get eaten by bears this winter when I had the horseshoe above the door. And then the next winter you've got the horseshoe above the door and you don't get eaten by bears. And by trial and error you prove when I've got a horseshoe above my door I don't get eaten by bears. And you tell your neighbour they should try it. All right? And that's the way it works, by trial and error. We would also call it specious reasoning, but that's... So what happened in terms of the stars was that the stars would shift into certain alignments, you know, for astrologers. And we know, for instance, in the time just around when Jesus was born, that Jupiter and Saturn were in conjunction several times. And for people who studied the stars closely, even though these were planets, they studied them closely, they saw them. And if something important happened in the world, they'd say, well, something happened in the stars and something important happened in the world, they must be connected, right? Because everything's connected. And so they looked for portents in the stars. And it's kind of like you find what you're looking for, right? So here's something in the stars are in alignment, so something important is going to happen. Now that's certainly what drives astrology as we understand it, and that's certainly what these wise men were. But they followed a story, they journeyed in fact, because of something which was true, whether they read it in the stars or not. And the star we're interested in is somehow this star that appeared over Bethlehem. Now we don't know what that was, what kind of light that was. Was it they saw Venus as either the morning star or the evening star, which is the brightest star in our sky? We don't know what it was, but we do know it's a completely believable story. In fact, we know from non-biblical records that astrologers or magi from the east actually visited Nero in the year 66, went to see him because of some portent that they had read in the stars. So it's a kind of a believable story, right? That they go to search out this person who they believed was born to be a king. Now, one of the things you can do when you study the scriptures, which is really helpful before you go and read all the learned people, is to find out what questions you want to ask. And the way you do that when you study scripture, and when I'm teaching preaching, this is what I say to the students, if you've got a piece of scripture that you're interested in, study it, by which I mean one of the things you can do is ask, why this and not that? Why is this in the story at all? Why is it this way and not that way? Why are there astrologers, magi, in this story at all? Why is Matthew interested in them? Now, in fact, we know that the church, by the time Matthew was writing this, was in conflict with astrologers and was in conflict with this pagan worldview because they believed that the world wasn't a closed system, that God himself, not bound to creation, outside creation, actually poured out his love and mercy and his power into creation, so it wasn't a closed system at all. So he's not trying to validate astrology. That's not why it's there. Okay? And in fact, if Matthew wants validation, what he does is he goes to the Old Testament. And if you've studied Matthew's Gospel, you'll know that he quotes the Old Testament more than anybody else, as he does in this story. When he wants proof about who Jesus is, he goes to the Old Testament. Jesus is the living embodiment of those prophecies from the Old Testament in Scripture. But what he is doing is introducing straight away at the beginning of his Gospel this idea that Jesus was big news to the whole world. All right? So that's why it has people who aren't Jews. They travel a long way to see Jesus because Jesus matters more than just to the Jews. Jesus matters to the whole world. His birth mattered to the whole world. And Matthew is already giving us clues about his whole story of the Gospel. If you've studied Matthew's Gospel, you'll know that in Matthew's Gospel, he tells us that Jesus, when he was crucified, had a sign above his head that says, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." And it was a pagan Roman soldier who declared, "Truly, this is the Son of God. This is the Son of God. This is news for the whole world." So he's letting us know early on that even though Jesus is a descendant of David, his kingship is for the non-Jews as well. His kingship is for the whole world. King of all the world. It's a line we sing in one of our carols. And so we would ask, what else is in this story? Well, why does Herod make an appearance? Why does it matter? He could have told the story that wise men came from the east and they brought gifts to Jesus. He didn't need to tell us the extra information about Herod. Why is it in there? Well, Matthew wants us to understand something else important. He wants us to make a contrast between two kings. All right, he's introduced Jesus the King, Jesus the Messiah, the descendant of David. And he's contrasting him with an earthly king. In fact, an earthly king who models all that is worst about earthly kings. Herod was a bad man, as Isaac pointed out to us in his talk. Herod was a very, very bad man. He was hungry for power and he was paranoid. He wasn't actually a Jew, he was an Idumean and close cousin and related. He thought people were out to get him his whole life, even his children. He had a number of wives, a lot of wives actually. Eventually he strangled had his most favourite wife strangled because he believed she was plotting against him. He had his sons executed. When he was sick and dying, and he knew that he was dying, he got his soldiers to bring some of the leaders from Jerusalem to the palace and had them executed so he could be certain that the city would be in mourning when he was dead. He was a bad man. And we don't talk about this next story, the slaughter of the innocents. And while lots of historians dispute it because it only appears in the Bible, no one doubts that Herod's the sort of person that would have ordered the execution of small children. And so there's this contrast between these two kings and these two kingdoms. And see, right at the beginning of his gospel, Matthew is setting up this choice between the true king of all the world and this earthly king. He's offering us a choice between a Messiah and a king born of David's line and a cruel and vicious maniac and king born of a pagan empire. And the journey to the discovery of Jesus is often one of choice. We are faced with this stark disconnect between the fallen, wounded world and its true king and what he has to offer us. And of course, it's not just about finding him. It's really about what we do when we get there. Now, one of the things that always intrigues me about the Christmas stories, and I've had to read them a lot, as we all do, but I have to preach on them every year, right? And what can you say new about Christmas? Some of you have been attending 3 or 4 Christmas services a year since you were knee-high to a grasshopper. You've probably heard this sermon preached on the Magi 40 times, maybe 50 times. I'm not telling you anything you haven't heard today. But whenever I read these stories, I'm always taken aback by this mixture of both the ordinary and the extraordinary, by what is just normal and what is actually wonder. It's like kind of this heaven meets earth idea that we see there. So, someone talking to a teenage girl is normal, right? But it's an angel talking to a teenage girl that gives her a message, an extraordinary message that she'll have a child. Shepherds were ordinary. They were ordinary working class people, right? But they have a heavenly host appears to them and starts singing. Wise men were part of the normal world. If they'd ridden past you in Jerusalem, you'd say, oh, well, there goes some Magi, all right? That's normal. But they're led by a star. They're led by a star that stops over Bethlehem. And the Christmas story is both ordinary and glorious. It's completely believable and it's fantastic as well. And in fact, I think the story of the Magi is one of the easiest to believe. I think we can forget the ordinariness of the story. And I think we need to remember that, the ordinariness that is woven into this. So last week the band went to Constitution Hill with the Timbrels and presented a Christmas concert, and Narelle was narrating the concert for us. And she told the story of Silent Night and the background of the story. And as she was talking about this, and she said the first words of the song, Silent Night, all is calm, all is bright. And for some reason, the image I had in my mind was of the video that we'd watched earlier in worship. And I don't know if you remember, but it was, there was Mary and Joseph, and they went to the stable, and they had the picture of the birth, right? And although we had beautiful music over the top, it appeared like Mary was screaming, right? She was yelling. And I thought, all is calm, all is bright. It must have been a bloke that wrote that, right? I've only attended 3 births, and I must say that I wasn't particularly helpful at any one of them. And in fact, at one stage, as Montana was entering the world, I did ask Sharon to keep the yelling down a bit. She tells me that I shushed her. See, our older daughter was out in the corridor and I was worried she'd get upset hearing him. I finally understood what a look of contempt means when Sharon looked at me Still makes me laugh. That was not my finest moment. The room wasn't calm and bright, except maybe the midwife. She was calm and bright. But that's about all. The atmosphere wasn't calm and bright. And Jesus' birth was real and it was ordinary, wasn't it? Like babies are born all the time. Like each child's a gift, we understand that. But babies are born all the time. Yet at the same time, it's God incarnate who's being born. All right? It's this mixture of the ordinary and the extraordinary in these stories. And I think it's a challenge with Jesus himself, isn't it? It's always the challenge. He's an ordinary good bloke. When you read the Gospels, he seems like a nice bloke, like people want to spend time with him. But he's also God incarnate, all right? The ordinary and the extraordinary mixed together. He's the glorious, ordinary King. And we must choose how we respond to him. That's our part that we play in this story. We choose how we respond to him. And so we ask again the question, why this and not that? So we ask, why did the Magi give him gifts? They didn't need to, right? They didn't need to give him gifts. They could have just waved through the window, or they could have spoken to Mary and Joseph, just shaken the hand and said, well done. Or they could have brought a meal, a lasagna or something, which would have been really helpful. But they brought gold, frankincense and myrrh. So why this and not that? Well, these are the gifts fit for a king, aren't they? They're the gifts fit for a king. When they journeyed to Jesus and they discovered him, they found the one that they sought, they gave him gifts fit for a king. And in a sense, of course, though, it was too much and too little. What could you really offer to Jesus that would mean something to him? What could you really offer? And even for Mary, I'm sure the gold came in handy. We find in the next story that they had to flee to Egypt, and so they needed some money. But what do you do with frankincense and myrrh when you're packing your backpack or your suitcase ready for the journey? What can we offer? What do we offer to Jesus? One of my favourite carols is The Little Drummer Boy. Glenn doesn't like it, and neither did the bass section. But I love this. I love this carol. All right. I love the story, right? The story of it. This little boy, and he comes to Jesus, and he doesn't have anything to offer him. He just says, I played my best for him. It's a lovely story. It's a great carol to play if you're at Westmead Station and you've been playing for an hour and a half and your lip's gone, because it just kind of sits on one note. You can just stay there a long time. So by the end of my session at Westmead, I'm just playing Deck the Halls and The Little Drummer Boy over and over. But it's a great story, isn't it? This little boy, I give you what I can. I give you what I can. So what does it mean to Jesus? What does it mean to him? That's all we can ever do, isn't it? Offer what we have. I do have a memory of something that happened when I was a little boy. I gave my grandmother, Nana Sandercock, a present. And I remember walking along the street with my brother, and I'd seen some nice sandstone rocks in the gutter. And I remember picking them up, and you do when you're a boy, right? You see a nice rock, you pick it up and put it in your pocket, right? Or a nice stick. And that's the way it works when you're a boy. I saw these two nice little bits of sandstone rocks, so I picked them up and put them in my pocket. And later we went to see Nana Sandercock, and I gave them to her. I thought she'd like them. So I gave her these two sandstone rocks, and I didn't think much more about it. I remember a few weeks later, or I don't remember how long it was, but some time later, it wasn't that same day, we went back to Nana Sandercock's house, and the two bits of sandstone were on her buffet. Remember buffets? We always used to have buffets where the good stuff was, and there was my two little pieces of sandstone rock. And I remember being caught by surprise. Because I didn't work it out at the time, but you see, my father had died, and she'd lost her son. So when her son's little boy brings her a present, it means something, doesn't it? Like the sandstone didn't cost anything really, but it meant something to her. See, every story has a context, every gift has a context. What do we offer? What do we offer to Jesus, really, when we come to him? What do we offer him? What we have to offer, to say or to do at the end of the journey. And perhaps it's the end of the journey that can make a journey hard, I think. I don't know if you've ever been on a hard journey, and I don't mean a long one. I don't mean one where, the tyre went flat on the EH or something. Have you ever done a hard journey? I remember being told as a boy on several occasions, unfortunately, go to the principal's office and tell him you've been very bad and you deserve 6 cuts of the cane. The young people in the other meeting didn't know what that was either, but you all understand, and none of you are surprised, I can see that. None of you are surprised that that's what happened. That's a hard journey. You go and tell the principal that he's got to punish you violently. I wonder if you've been on a journey that was hard, though. I wonder if you've had to go to someone and apologise for something you've done, gone to someone to seek forgiveness when you've done the wrong thing. Is that a hard journey to make? And sometimes that's just a journey across a room, isn't it? To seek forgiveness. Some journeys are harder. And the context changes. We go to the hospital to see a newborn baby. Our hearts are full of joy. And we go to the hospital to visit someone who's dying and our hearts are full of grief. The context changes the journey no matter how long or short it is. It's not the length of the journey at all, really. The walk to the holiness table or the mercy seat can seem like the longest journey, can't it? Prompted by the Holy Spirit. Go and kneel. That can be a hard journey, can seem a very long one. We've always valued it in the Salvation Army. You see, it can look like a piece of sandstone. It can look to the outsider like it's merely to walk, to kneel at a piece of furniture. But of course, really, it's to kneel at the feet of the King. I want us to sing. We're going to sing the end of one of those carols. Oh, come, let us adore him. We can sing it without accompaniment. I'm sure we can do that. And as we sing it, and I know you've heard this Christmas story before, but what do you bring to Jesus right now? What do you bring to him right now in this moment? What do you offer him as a gift, freely given? What do you and I offer to Jesus right now? What do we offer him? Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him. Christ the Lord.